All right, well, welcome everyone. Welcome to Dakota Wesleyan and this panel that you are a part of today. It's great that you're here. We just came over from our campus ministry service where I had to hit plastic mallets on a floor to Eye of the Tiger, and Rebecca Treff's son got to play drums to that, so that was the ringer. We just brought him up there, and however poorly we played, no one even heard it. So they just watched him. That was the whole goal. So lots going on here at all times. You just never know what you're walking into, and I'm sure you can all relate as you walked into different meetings and rooms. I want to congratulate Teresa Creasy for her big news and her appointment now at Mitchell Tech. Learned a lot from her, working with her, and now I do lots more on Excel than I had ever imagined. But we also know how to disaggregate the data now, right? And I came out of the English department, so that's pretty amazing. So here we're visiting about leadership development and people, taking a chance, right, and making a difficult choice about saying, I'm going to take the lead, I'm going to take the charge, whether that's just in your department, thank you, Pedro, or whether it's, in your office or to represent the city, so that's great. Recently, on a Saturday morning, after our Board of Trustees meetings, we had the Scripps Spelling Bee and Special Olympics basketball on our campus on the same day. Mr. Skelly was there. He knew the pressure that was in that room. He was not in the basketball part. He was over where it was more competitive, which was the spelling bee, right? So we had, hundreds of people come to Mitchell, stay in hotels, eat at our restaurants, and visit our campus. So that was a wonderful event. Some people who were supposed to be in the basketball venues, at the middle school or wherever, they walked into the spelling bee, and you kind of had to look at the parent, and it's like, that a parent of a basketball player or a basketball referee or a spelling bee student, and you're like, kudos if that person's a spelling bee student. There we go, right? So South Dakota Newswatch made sure that Scripps spelling bee occurred, and so did the South Dakota Humanities Council, right? We need those donations, we need those sponsorships. They wanted to make sure that someone from South Dakota was representing the state in Washington, D.C., right? So after I high-fived all the students up there before it started so that they didn't have to look any more foolish than me, and it's true, the reporter can vouch for that. I said that South Dakota Newswatch knew that people from small towns and small states can do big things, and that's why they donated the money, right? And I think that's why we're here today, too. So we want to think about what DWU does here coming up on Service Day. We're out in the schools, the parks, the ditches, and the sports fields, committing to service. Paul, you should have been here 5 minutes ago when I started, but that's all right. We're helping in nursing homes, singing in nursing homes, food pantry, cleaning up the community. But we also do different things for the community during the year. So just some highlights. Our science faculty, like Paula Mazer, Brian Patrick, they're doing course-based research experiences where they're doing clinical research in like 200-level classes, right? So if someone's taking one bio course, they get some experience in clinical research, right? So that's something we focus on here. It's not a lecture course, right? It's project-based, problem-based learning. Dr. Patrick and Dr. Mazer will both have students that conduct research all summer as summer research fellows here on campus. So the faculty could be doing many things. Dr. Patrick's going to France and Rome before that. I'm trying to get to Omaha, right? Just trying to get that far. But he'll come back for that. So Dr. Patrick, as you probably know, works with spiders, and Dr. Mazer looks at char from forest fires and what happens when that gets to a water source and analyzes that. So DWU out in the community, we need your help, right? We're not a party school. We offer classes, sports, performing arts, ministry, research, and service, right? So sometimes people choose something else than that, but that's what we do. So thank you for being here today and helping out the community and offering so many opportunities for people like me and others who have children here, and that's why we stayed, right? So thank you. And I get a lunch now, right? I get a lunch. Earned a lunch. All right.
Thank you so much. My name is Susan Kipke, and I serve as president of the Mitchell Chamber of Commerce Governmental Affairs Committee. I, like our panelists, served as an elected official, but I now manage Wild Oak Golf Course. Thank you for joining us for our Candidate School and Issue Lunch and Learn. We'd like to thank the Mitchell Area Chamber of Commerce Governmental Affairs Committee for putting together this event. We're excited to have all of you join us here at Dakota Wesleyan University, whether it be in person or virtually. We would also like to thank Fresh Ideas for catering today's lunch. I would like to start by introducing our panel members. After introductions, we will move on to questions. I will ask a series of questions. Once we get through those questions, time permitting, we will take questions from the audience. For those in attendance, please write your question on the card provided, raise your hand, and someone will be by to collect them. Correct? Okay. For those of you online, we may text your question to 606-627-4585. Again, 606-627-4585. Now let me introduce our panelists. Gary Drews lives in Rapid City and is serving his second term as a Pennington County Commissioner. He is past president of the South Dakota Association of County Commissioners, and in his earlier life served 4 terms as mayor of Pierre. Gary has managed school board, city and county commissioner, state legislator, and constitutional officer races, as well as his own successful and unsuccessful races. He and his wife Bobby have 7 children, 20 grandchildren, and 3 great-grandchildren. Teresa Creasy has spent her career in education. Well, this is old news now, because I am currently serving as business manager for the Mitchell School District and interim president of Mitchell Technical College, but as you all heard, she will now be president of Mitchell Technical College. A former school board president, she advocates for lifelong learning and strong educational foundations. She leads and supports several community boards, including Dakota Counseling Institute and Mitchell Area Economic Development. Teresa and her husband Rick are longtime members of the Mitchell community, proud parents of 2 and grandparents of 4. Lance Koth lives in Mitchell and served as a state representative for District 20 for 6 years. He is now retired, but he spent 6 years in the Air National Guard, followed by a 45-year career working in banking and financing in Mitchell, Watertown, and Winter, which won him a spot on the Appropriations Committee while he was in the legislature. He is married to Patty, has 4 children and 6 grandchildren. Tona Rosem is a DWU graduate. She's been a Main Street business owner for 25 years and a financial advisor for 31 years. She served on the City Council for 9 years and in the South Dakota House of Representatives for 8 years. Her leadership spans from the South Dakota Department of Transportation, South Dakota Community Foundation, DWU Board of Trustees, and multiple community boards. We will now move on to our questions. What inspired you to run for the office or offices that you held or hold, and what qualities or motivations do you believe make someone well suited to run for public office? All right, I'll start. Anybody can start.
I have seniority, apparently. So I ran for city council. Well, I'm kind of a noisy person, if you don't know me. I have, if you're going to talk about it, I think you need to jump in and do something about it. And so we were in Main Street business, and 2 people I knew walked through the front door, and they weren't 2 that usually hung together, and it was Gordy Thompson and a friend, Margaret Quinnell, some of you will remember, and said, will you run for city council? And we had, at that point, our city council had been around quite a while, and we're kind of tired, and we weren't getting anywhere. I mean, Mitchell, really, our Main Street was terrible, and that's taken a lot of years. Look at it today, but it only goes to show you how slowly the wheels turn. So I ran for city council, And kind of same thing happened for the legislature. A fellow legislator came over, and he wanted both John and I there, and I thought he was going to run for Congress and that he was asking our support, and lo and behold, he came in and said, would you consider running for the legislature? Noel Hamill at that time, who was our publisher of the newspaper, had gone for a term. So I said no initially, and then my business partner said yes, and so I said yes. And that was the start of that. And I like the second part of that question, do you have the qualities to run? And I will tell you, you have to listen. If you're not a person that's willing to listen, don't do it. You can have your opinions, you can have your ideas, but you, as a legislator, you're representing 22,000 people, several counties. Washington Springs is different than Mitchell. All of them are different, and you don't have enough time to walk in everybody's shoes. So you have to listen, and it's critical that you do that before you form an opinion, because if you're passing ordinances in the city or legislation at the state level, you have to always think of what the practical impact is on the people you're affecting. Everything that you do has a consequence, and sometimes those are unintended consequences. So you need to be able, I always say, think around corners, because it doesn't always hit you right up front. You have to think about what if, what if, what if. So I think being able to listen is absolutely critical. Being willing to talk to people and ask them questions about why they think what they think. And then your family has to be behind you, because at least today, whether it's good or bad, sometimes I think it's not so good, but there is social media. We do have cell phones. When I was on the council, we didn't have that, and my husband took all of the phone calls on our landline, and there's some doozies. And so he had warned me that should I ever decide to run for city council again, he'd be out. So, but that's different today, and I think we just have more capabilities of connecting with people. But you do have to have your family behind you. You need thick skin, and your family needs thick skin, because unfortunately, some people get personal. And it shouldn't be personal, because it's about policy, and today it's, I think, worse than ever. And there's a saying, good policy makes for good politics. Politics does not make for good policy. And most of the issues that you deal with, whether it's at the state level or locally, are not D or R, or they're just issues that need solutions. And so even the voting in Pierre and all my years there may have been a few partisan votes early on, but they weren't partisan votes. I mean, it was like, what's the solution? What will best serve? You represent 22,000 people when you're in the legislature, but you are a trustee for the entire state. And you have to always remember that, because everything you do impacts the whole state, and not just your neighbors or your family or the local political committee, whatever it is. So that's that. I'm done. I'm finished now.
Why did I run for office? I felt a strong urge, and through the influence of a good friend of mine, Lance Carson. I remember when Lance Carson first decided to run, I ran across him at Campbell's Supply, and he told me he was going to run. And I looked at him and I said, "You're crazy." And, he didn't have really any political background, and I don't believe that he had a lot of support in the political world at that point. If I remember right, he did not win the first run. Came back and he did. So he was not only a friend, but he was a mentor. So why did I run? I didn't run to be a politician. I really didn't have a desire to be in that world. I didn't have a long-term goal. Kind of like being in the career that I was, been there and done that. I didn't need another career. So I looked at it as a public servant. And I would just say that we need both. We need those folks that are aspiring to be politicians. We need them. I mean, they're a student of the game. They work hard. They don't give up. And I also believe that you need to have what I would consider public servants. And what Tona has indicated you listen. You don't have an agenda. I did not have an agenda. Some people do. I'm not saying that's bad, but I did not have an agenda. I was fortunate, I say fortunate, to serve in the Appropriations Committee. That was a learning curve, but I enjoy numbers, and I enjoy that part of it. So why did I run? For that reason. I aspired to be on that committee. I was fortunate enough to be selected for that committee. So that's why I ran, to be a public servant.
Do you want the rest of us to keep going, or I mean, they really covered a lot there. I ran for the local school board, which is much different than the aspirations of being in the state representation. For me, it was about the ability to bring my knowledge to help to effect or affect change in the place where my kids were participating in their education. So I don't like to be the Saturday night quarterback that sits back in the armchair and says, well, they should have done or they shouldn't have done. If I want to be part of what should have or shouldn't have done, then I need to volunteer and put my name up and say, yeah, I'm willing to be part of this. And education, obviously, as you've heard from what they've said about me today, is a passion for me. And this was a chance and an opportunity to be involved in the changes in education from a positive standpoint. I'm a firm believer that if you're going to run for anything, you shouldn't run because you have one issue. If you have one issue, you need to find a way to affect change on that issue. But that should not be the only reason you run for office, because when you are in that chair, you may have an opinion about something, but you have to remember that the people that put you in that chair by electing you have an opinion as well, and you're representing them. And so you have to listen. I can't think of a better thing as listening. But you also have to be willing to say, yep, personally this might not be what I think, but my constituents want this, so I need to advocate for that. Because after all, they're the people that put you in the chair and elected you to be part of that. So I think that if I were to give anybody any advice, if you want to run for an office, just think about why you're running. And if you're running because you want to be a part of change or a part of what's happening, that's great. And I would encourage anybody.
Thank you.
So I got started by not being a candidate myself, but by managing campaigns for various other people, from school boards to county or city commission. I never ran one for county commission until I became one, and also for the legislature and for Congress. And one of the things I discovered in that for myself personally is that you can only be supportive of an individual and run a campaign for those people that you truly believe in. And I did get involved in a campaign later on where I didn't necessarily believe in what that person was really standing for. And consequently, we were unsuccessful in that campaign. And as I look back on it, I didn't regret the fact that we didn't win it either. And so you have to decide yourself as to where you stand on issues. And, all of these, whether it's school board, township, county commission, city council, legislature, they all impact our lives on a daily basis. Sometimes we don't recognize that, but government does impact our lives all the time. And so why allow somebody else to make those decisions and set the course if you have some firm convictions yourself? And so that's really why I became a candidate myself back in the late 80s for a city commission. I actually was serving on the Chamber of Commerce Board of Directors. And they were looking for a candidate for city commission, and somebody mentioned that I should consider that. And I hadn't given it a thought about it for myself before that. But as I sat down and thought about it and went out and met with individuals, and I think that's one of the critical things is not only do you need to have your family support, but when you decide that you want to be a candidate and be a spokesperson for your constituents, I think it's critical that you go out and you find 10 to 15 people that you can sit down with and relay the message as to why you want to be the candidate, why you want to run. And you aren't going to know all of the issues at that point in time. But lay out where your beliefs are at, and then ask them, based on what I've said to you, would you support me? Because those are the people that are going to be critical as you establish your campaign and run for an office. And I just think it's absolutely necessary that you have that support group that you can call on. And typically, up until I became a county commissioner, when I was mayor, I sat down at least every month with a group of supporters on Saturday mornings. And we'd get together 6 or 7 o'clock every Saturday, once a month on Saturday mornings, and talk about the various issues that were going on with the city. And I'd get their feedback, because quite frankly, once you get elected, I never heard from constituents again. I mean, the normal constituents. You just don't hear from them unless you're doing something that they don't like. And so you need to take it on your own to figure out whether your ideas are good ideas, whether you're making the progressive moves that the community would like, but you need to have a sounding board, and those 10, 12, 15 people can be your sounding board and tell you whether or not you're on the right track or not.
Thank you. What was your time commitment to the office you held compared to what you anticipated it would be?
Well, I don't know that I anticipated. On the council, you knew that you had budget season, which for us was in the summer. We usually met at 6 a.m., contrary to my choice, because I'm not awake then, but we did because people had to go to work. You know, you were at work by 8 or 9. And it was, frankly, easier than the evenings, but I think it goes both ways. It depends on what that particular budget hearing would be. If you needed people that you knew were going to come in, evenings could be easier than 6 a.m. So that's a time commitment during, it used to take us about 3 weeks, I think, of meetings, and then you'd come back around. You also, at the council level, serve on a couple of committees which met in addition, and it would depend on the committee how much time you put into it. But it really is kind of a full-time job, because you need to be available for your constituents who maybe have concerns or opinions or ideas. My approach always was, when somebody would have a problem, tell me what you think a good solution would be, because then we have a point from which to work. And in the legislature, you're there. I mean, you pretty much give up those 9 weeks. You're home on weekends, but there's Cracker Barrels and meetings and involvement and a little time with your family, you hope. But during the year, you're busy. I mean, it's not like it's full-time, but there's meetings. You might be in peer. There might be summer studies. So I would say it's not on call 24/7, but really you need to be available. And one of the really cool things in either of those positions, and I think one of the reasons it's really fun to serve, is you're in a position to help people. And if they call you with an issue, you may know where to go, but you know who to go to help you out, to find that person. And you find, like in peer, I mean, in Mitchell, you pretty much know where to go. In peer, you had to figure out who were the people that you could trust, who was a good source of good information, not their opinion. And I, frankly, the current lieutenant governor was my go-to, because he had been in the governor's office the whole time. So I would either email or text Tony and say, here's my constituent issue. Tell me who to get in touch with. And within sometimes 10 minutes, but certainly within a couple of hours, I'd be connected to whomever I needed. And because you're in the legislature, that's a positive thing. They'll listen to you. So we solved some issues that people would never ever know about that might be in the healthcare area, because you could actually dig in and find a solution for folks. So I think that's one of the coolest things. But it does take time. But it's absolutely worth it, in my opinion, if you're willing to do it. It's an education you can't buy. You will understand the process, and you have a lot more patience, perhaps, when you watch things going on and you're pulling your hair out and say, why is this taking so long? Typical government. But you figure out there is a process and there's a reason, and a lot of people are impacted. So I think I wouldn't have taken on a whole bunch of other things. I mean, I served on a lot of the nonprofit groups, but I didn't take on anything new while I was in the legislature for sure, because there just wasn't the time to do it. But it's worth it. I say 100%, right, Lance?
Time commitment, and again, I would just reference a good friend, mentor, Lance Carson. I watched him closely and we talked. I knew going in that, as Tony indicated, not full-time, but you're accessible and you need to be available. I'm looking around the room, for the most part, a number of you have not lived without cell phones, email, text messaging, those types of things. And because of that, we carry our phones with us. And so the phone calls would get, the emails I would get, the text messages I would get. In addition to that, a little bit of a surprise serving on the Appropriations Committee. That committee does serve 12 months out of the year. Although it isn't full-time, many financial reports would come by email and you needed to respond to that. So it really took a large chunk of time out of my life. And was mentioned earlier, my wife was very supportive, and if without that, I would not have and I could not have done that. So the time commitment, yes, you're serving a lot of people. Secondly, for me, I kind of did my homework. I knew that going in, and that was important.
Thank you.
I think one of the important parts about thinking about running for public office is we all look at, in my case, the school board meets twice a month, but we don't think about all the other things that go into that, the meetings that go into preparing for that, the time that goes into preparing for that, the events that you need to attend because you're a school board member. You sit on panels like that. No, I'm just kidding. But these kinds of things. So you have to realize that it's not just, I have to show up every other Monday night for an hour meeting, right? And if they ever only lasted an hour. But the point is, it's a commitment, and it's a commitment, as both people have, or all people up here have said, for your whole family. So there are times when, you have to go to the basketball game because that's the right thing to do, because you want to be available and supportive of your constituents and of both sides. You're serving the people, you're making rules for the people, for other people, right? So you need to have that. So that probably, for the first year, was a little bit of a surprise about, how much time your real life, but now the life of service that you chose takes. But you just have to think about that. Is it a point in your time? I think for me, when I ran and was in the school board, my children were younger, and I thought, wow, what a great example for them to see, because if I had to go, unless it was, a dinner, if I had to go, they had to go too, right? And so they learned that if I'm going to serve my community, which we all should, then how can I do it and what capacity it takes to do that? And so that's kind of how, was I surprised about the amount of time? I had, fortunately before that, I had worked in public education and I watched the board, so I understood what that had to do. But I think, the ancillary stuff was a little bit surprising, but very well worth it.
I couldn't agree more with those comments. I could get by with going to my meeting, and we meet one day every 2 weeks for our county commission. And I could probably get by with doing those 2 6-hour days and not doing anything else. But if you want to be prepared and you want to attend those other functions that are necessary, you need to put in the time. And I probably average about 30 hours a week on my county commission responsibilities. And I know that people look at that and they say, well, what do you mean? You only meet a couple times a month. Yeah, but that doesn't involve all the research and so forth that you need to do. Where I represent, we're a growing area. We've had a lot of growth in the last few years since COVID. And so it's required a lot of time by all of our commissioners in order to get ordinances updated, et cetera, to meet the standards that we're setting for the people that are coming in. We want to control growth to a certain extent, but there's only a certain amount that you can do to control that also. they're coming. They're there. And then you have an air base right next door that's growing like crazy. And so you better prepare yourself for it. And it takes a lot of time to get yourself prepared mentally so that you know what you're talking about when those issues come up.
Thank you. Would you please share your experiences regarding raising money and campaigning? For instance, how much time did you put into campaigning? How many weeks in advance did you start? And how much money does it take to run a successful campaign? Understanding every elected office has a different answer depending on the office being sought.
Well, I think the sooner you can announce for a vacancy coming up, or if you're going to run, you should, because it's about name recognition. So then the next question is, how do you get your name out there, and how do you pay for what you get out there? On the legislative side, we were always lucky because the local party would buy a billboard or two for each of the candidates that were running, and they're kind of expensive, and I don't even remember now, but to me it seems like it was about $4,000, am I right, John? For a couple of them. But people need to see the name, and yard signs really do, I think, work. And we have a sign company in Mitchell, and they weren't there when I first started, but they met the prices. And I will say this on a sign: don't put a lot of colors on it. Don't do a lot of print. Mine basically said Tona and Rosem, big print, District 20. And then you have to put at the bottom, paid for by Committee for Tona Rosem for the whatever the handle is. That doesn't have to be legible when you're driving by, but make it like two colors, dark blue and white, red and white, something so it doesn't fade away, because people are just driving by. But and you get a lot of signs out, I think. We would go on the radio, but once you were in the legislature, we always had Saturday morning shows with JP, which were a blast, because you just got to sit and parry back and forth on whatever the local bills were. But once, it's about name recognition. How you raise the money, that's another question. I was in a position because of being a financial advisor that I couldn't ask people for money for a political spot, so I had to I had a campaign person who wrote a letter with her name on it, and we would get money that way. But people would give you money, and once you're in peer, and people kind of know how you think, how you act, if you have common sense, if you listen, you will get PAC money, but there's, and I'm going to go to that for just a second, but so you will get money from certain areas, like the physical therapist perhaps would be one area where the realtors, so you get a little bit of money from a lot of places. People that you know will give you money. Same on city council. I just had people handing me money and saying, thank you for running. So, and I don't think on any of my campaigns I spent a whole boatload of money, because you can carry your signs over if you make them in such a manner that it's not saying elect Tona Rosem, so then you have to have re-elect, or so you got to think through your signage so that you can pass it down. And Lance Carson was great because he always had the metal things that you put in. You want strong ones because our wind will take them out, lay them flat in a hurry. I want to just say a quick thing about lobbyists, because that's become such a dirty word. But because we have term limits, which I think I supported it at the get-go. I'm not sure that I do now, or at the city level, because we have such a small state that finding people willing to give up the time, whose family's willing to give up the time, that they can give up the time and move away from whatever their career is. We don't have a ton of people to do that. So you can switch back and forth, but consequently, we don't have the history. So these people that represent the various factions of business are the ones that have the history, and you have to learn from them. And a good lobbyist, and I will say, in all my time, I only remember 2 that I think were not so good, but they will tell you both sides. So if they're coming to you because their constituent has a request for this reason, I would always say, so why would I vote the other way? What's the other side of it? And if they're a good one, they'll tell you. So you get a lot of people in your pocket along the way for your resources, which you desperately need. And sometimes today I think we just see people waving their flag and making noise, but forgetting that they need to listen to those people. So I wish I could tell you a dollar amount, but I never spent it a whole ton, so.
Thank you.
Raising money, I never liked that part of campaigning. Consequently, my first run, I did not send a letter out, and I applaud anybody that does. I did a lot of walking, knocking on doors, putting up signs, and you talk about dollars, it was certainly in 5 figures that I spent. By the time you have signs printed and do all that, radio, newspaper, all cost money. And as Tona indicated, after you served 2 years, and I decided to run again, it was much easier for a couple of reasons. Number one, I already had the signs. Number 2, I already had my spreadsheet on where I could put my signs, phone numbers, etc. Give them a call. Yep, same place, whatever. Number 3, if you are doing a reasonable job, the money will flow in. And then we talk about the lobbyists and these particular groups of people out there. I love them. Simply because they are experts in their world. I'm not. When it comes to health care, I don't know. When it comes to education, I'm not an expert. So I relied heavily on them. And I had found that once you do that, listen and be open to it, take those parts that make sense, that those folks wanted to support you. So I ran 3 times. My last 2 times, money was not an issue. I mean, it came in, and which I was thankful for. But probably the most important thing, for me at least, now I had spent, Tona, you were born and raised in Mitchell, so
Yeah.
you're well known. I spent
No, I'm
40
married to me.
I spent 40 years in the banking industry in Mitchell. So, I always say I had some people that were okay with me, some people that really liked me, and then there was a group that said, maybe I wasn't able to provide them with the service. But nevertheless, the name recognition kind of sort of was there, so I didn't deal with that. It's just a matter of letting the public know I'm running for office. I don't know that there's any better way than to knock on doors and take the time in the communities that we serve in the district and in Mitchell. And I did a lot of that. And that was very heartwarming to listen to them, answer their questions. They ask you, how do you stand on certain issues? But that took a lot of time, and I'm glad I did that. And I think that's very important.
Can I add in for just a second?
Thank you.
I want to follow up on what Lance said. You will make enemies no matter where you serve, because some people think it's a black and white world. And if it were, it would be so easy. But there is so much gray, absolutely so much gray. I'm not even sure there is any black and white when you make some of these decisions. So, as Lance said, there are going to be people that don't like you, but you can't take it personally, because it should be about policy. And you learn that. Really, people will learn it the hard way in peer, because if you make it personal, you lose respect. It has to be the policy. And the one good thing about the lobbyists, or any other legislator for that matter, they might tell you their story, but in the end you say, I just can't support it for whatever reason, whether it's your constituents that you can't support it, and they're the good ones, which is most of them, will say, that's great, thank you for listening, and we appreciate your honesty. So I think, I'll go back, honesty is another besides listening. You have to be honest, you have to be reliable. You go in with a block of wood, and every time you tell somebody you're going to do something and you don't, or you're going to vote some way and you don't share it, a chunk gets off. And there's some people that have no block of wood left after one session. And you have a few of those that you serve with. So it's really critical. But you can't be everybody's friend. You just got to try to do the right thing. And hope not too many make it personal, but there are those. I think Facebook must be hard today because people get so personal on there that, oof.
I think the most surprising thing for me was after I announced that I was going to run, the money that came to my home that I didn't expect. So people are very supportive of wanting someone to run because we need people in the legislature, we need people at city council, we need people on school boards, and so, thank you for running was a lot of the money that came in. For me, it was getting my name out there, okay? So yard signs, I'm married to a gentleman that worked in the seed industry, and he had tons of seed signs that could be easily covered with my name on them, so we had tons of things to stick in yards. But the other thing I would say is you can't do it alone. You have to have a team. So if you have people that support you, then ask them to support you in a way like, can you find 5 people that will do a yard sign, right? Those types of things. Here are some things to hand out about me. We did a lot of walking and knocking on doors. It was fun to talk to people, but if they weren't there, I always left something, but I also had other people walking and knocking on doors with me. It wasn't me. There's no way. I mean, all I had to cover was the school district of Mitchell, not the region or whatever but you have to get your name out there because when they go to the ballot, there will be truly people that will go there and they will only remember that they saw your name somewhere. They don't take the time, they go and vote, and thank goodness they do, but they don't necessarily take the time to investigate the candidates. So if they remember your name, then it's there and they'll check the box. I think the other thing that I went after is many people think that the only time you can vote in a school district election is if you live in the city of Mitchell, which is not true. It's if you live in the school district. So I made a special point to reach out to the people that I would think were on the fringe of the voting, thinking they could never vote, to send them I sent the letter. That was before postage is what it is now, but I sent a letter that said, remember to vote. And always my materials or my ended up with, I would really like you to vote for me. You have to ask for the vote. That's one thing I learned over the years from being married to someone who if you came to the house, yeah, he used sales, and if you didn't ask for it, you weren't going to get it. So yes, yeah.
Thank you.
So I'm going to try not to be redundant here. But one of the things I picked up on is Lance said that he walked a lot. And that was my big thing, was walking, especially, and I've done it in every campaign that I've been involved in myself. So the timetable, I always figured for myself, I had to give myself at least 8 months before the election to figure out whether or not I was running. I needed that first 4 months just to plan it out after I made that determination. After I had those 10 to 15 people lined up and agreed that they went along with my philosophy. And for fundraising, I used them for holding individual receptions, for raising the funds. Because it's a tough deal to go out and ask for funds, I find, for myself. So it was much easier for them to put on a reception either at their home or another location and ask people, their friends, to come. And while there, ask them for a donation. So if I was running for like city commission for Pierre, that was nonpartisan, so he's only dealing with one election there. For the legislature, for county commission, it's a partisan, and so you may have a primary election too. And so what I would do is I would try to get out and I would walk the entire area. I would have door hangers printed up, and I'd take half of those door hangers and I'd write a personal note on them, including my phone number, because you're going to find less than half of them at home. And so leave the door hanger, not that you're necessarily going to go back, but invite them to call you with their thoughts or ideas or suggestions. And not a lot of them do, but they like that personal note on there. So after a primary election, now I know where I was lacking in votes. And so then I would take the voting records again, and I would look at where I thought I should have done better, and I would rewalk those areas, not walk the whole thing, but rewalk those areas to try to capture more votes. So dollar-wise, it depends on what you're up against as far as what you need to generate and raise. You know, for running for the county commission the first time, I had 2 opponents in the primary. I had 1 opponent in the general election. That was my first time running for that particular office. It probably cost at least twice as much that time than it would have cost me this last time. Fortunately, I ended up with no candidates this last time, so it really didn't cost me basically anything. But I'm always an advocate that everybody should be challenged. I don't advocate that people should be able to just be reelected based on what they've done. If there's people that have an interest in it, they should step up and run against that incumbent even.
Thank you. What are some of the achievements you are most proud of from your time in office, and did you experience any disappointments?
Well, lots of disappointments, certainly. While I served under Dennis Dugard, he took it upon himself to get rid of a whole bunch of stuff on the books. We have more laws on the books than you can shake a stick at. I don't remember how many pages, how many words, but they really did an awesome job with that. And frankly, I know the press asked me when I was going in, so what's your agenda? It's like, I don't have an agenda. I'm really going to represent our people and to do the best that I can. But I think if the one good thing is that we stopped a lot of bad bills that would have ended up in statute. And I think that you almost find that's what you're doing out there. You're just playing hardball with some of the bills that don't belong there. And we saw a lot of it this year where there's a lot of legislation that should have been at the local level. And it was my line out there, we don't want the federal government telling us what to do at the state level, and we shouldn't be telling local government what to do. But yet this year, in particular, we were trying to tell school boards what to do. They were the sitting duck. But I think you have to remember that government closest to the people is the best government. There were a few things that were passed that, well, one that didn't pan out as well is the whole prison rework, which was really, the good thing that came out of that were all of the 24/7 DUI courts and drug courts. And that's been a huge positive, but we just have so far to go in terms of how we handle people that end up in prison. And that's obviously going to be ongoing for a while. Some of the biggest disappointments going in, I happened to hit the year where we had a structural deficit of $127 million. So Rounds had said we're going to have to cut 5%. By the time Dennis was elected, he came back with his budget request and said we need a 10% across the board cut. That's $127 million. We weren't even at $1 billion budget today, and I think we're at $7.2 billion now, or 5.2. I can't even remember. The number's big. I don't even remember. But cutting $127 million or 10% across the board means you're cutting nursing homes, you're cutting school teachers, you're cutting Life Quest. You couldn't do it. That was horrible, horrible, horrible. What had happened, and it's very much like today, because of the credit crisis, there's a lot of federal funds that came in. That's one-time money. You cannot spend one-time money on ongoing services, such as teachers' salaries or anybody's salaries. So that was happening, and all of a sudden that funding dried up, and we were short money. The good thing is, there was a shortfall this year, so there was only a 1.25% raise for teachers and staff, but that could have been much, much worse had the governor and the lieutenant governor not putting money aside of that one-time money. So I think that the disappointment wasn't anything that I could control, was that 10%, and there were a lot of really mad people. I mean, really mad people at home, and I didn't really want to go out in public, to tell you the truth, because somebody knew a teacher, somebody knew a nurse. I mean, but you can't get money that you don't have. You can't spend it. The other thing that kept me awake is Indian health care, and to this day, it still keeps me awake, because we couldn't keep providers on the reservation. At that point, we were spending $92 million of our tax dollars to pay for Medicaid for Indian health. That is, by treaty, a responsibility of the federal government. Think of that $92 million, and we wouldn't have been able to recover all of it, because I don't think nursing homes would have been covered in that, but it would have been north of $50 million at that point. Think what you could do with that for teachers, for nursing homes, for all of the things that we have to fund for our state. So that we didn't get anywhere. I mean, we talked a lot. Since then, there's been some advancement with telehealth or telemed, but we're still working on that. The Department of Health Secretary is somebody I served with, and if you have a chance to listen to her, you have a club that you would like a speaker, let me know. I'll give you her information. But just the maternal and baby death rate on the reservation is amazing. I mean, that's not the right word. It will make you sick to your stomach. And a lot of it happens after the baby is born in that first year, and it's not all the baby. A lot of it's the mother. There's just a lack of health care. That still weighs today. I just think we should be able to do better. But those kinds of issues aren't partisan issues. They're just simply issues that need solutions. And wherever you go, wherever you serve, whether it's the city level or state level or whatever, it's all about solutions, and it's finding solutions. And there's, and you're not going to get it your way 100% of the time, because then we tend to give up the good for the perfect, and that doesn't always work out. Can I throw in an idea about the other thing on time? Parades are a blast, and so I think no matter where you're running, the small town parades, all of the towns have events, fundraisers for nonprofits in Mitchell and any town. If you're running on the legislative side, you need to get to those events, because you will meet the people. Typically, the people that vote are the people that care, are the people that do those things, and so that's how you show them that you do care. So. That's it.
Thank you.
As far as achievement, personally, I really can't come up with anything. If you look at it corporately, serving on the Appropriations Committee as we navigated through the COVID era and all the federal money that came through, long debates into the night hours as it relates to who has the authority. Does the executive branch, because of the time constraints, or does the legislature have the authority to spend those money, and where should it go? You had to set up procedures, and who's going to monitor it. So I would say that through that era, an achievement that I look at serving on that committee, we were able to navigate through that, and we had a lot of hard discussions, a lot of people that felt we should have done it differently. But there wasn't any clawback from the federal government to speak of, and our state, South Dakota, doing it wrong. And I think that's an achievement, and it's a testament to the entirety of the legislature at that time. The other thing I would say that the guardrails, and Tony alluded to that, the guardrails that we have in our state, we have to balance the budget. We cannot spend more money than what we take in. When Tona was in Pierre, under Governor Dugard, he had to make a 10% cut. So those guardrails are there. In one way, it makes our job easier. They're there. They're not going to move. On the other hand, it makes it very difficult, because we don't have a choice. You either raise taxes or you reduce spending when you have a shortfall. So I always say that is an achievement, But we just have to do it. As Tona went through the tough time, I went through the good time. We had more money coming in from the federal government than we knew what to do with.
Well, I had the great pleasure of serving on the local school board when Tono was in Pierre giving us the 10% cut. So I would have to say maybe. But you know what? We understood that's the situation. We serve at the will of the taxpayer. I pay taxes just like you do, and we all don't want to pay taxes, or we want to pay the taxes and get the services that we pay for. So it was a tough time, but what I liked about what they did, and I think it was an accomplishment. Certainly, you can say it was a challenge, but it was accomplishment as well. We banded together. There wasn't anybody that felt less of a pinch than anybody else. We all knew we had to do it, and so we banded together. I think one of the big accomplishments that happened while I was on the school board, and you know what's really interesting is it's coming to fruition today. I was on the planning committee that said in 2025 we would be opening a new school, and it's very interesting. Here we are, yes, and what's really cool is I'm part of the construction process right now, but it's been tough over the years. We laid that plan out with good reason. We looked at age of buildings. I don't know if many of you remember in the early 90s when we had 5 crumbling grade schools in Mitchell, South Dakota, and we had to make some tough decisions and some interesting partnerships to develop that. So we didn't want to be in that situation again. So we made some decisions and some plans, and we put together a plan. And I remember several times throughout, after I left the board and before it came to a fruition, was whoever picked that year 2025, and I can remember thinking, I did. You know, so you want to talk about consequences and choices and actions. But I think that basis of the plan, although I wasn't there when it was carried out, it helped set up the school district for a future success. And so, you know, in May, we're going to move the stuff from the old school into the new school, and it's going to be great.
Thank you.
So my life philosophy is that 90% of the job that I do is going to be well planned out. I'm going to be pleased with the outcome of it and so forth. 10% of that's going to be a real challenge. You put yourself into those challenge situations, and it doesn't have to be a loss. You still work for the betterment of whatever the issue may be, and try to make it the best that you think that it can be, even though it's not exactly what you would like to have. So what I've done in my serving the various capacities, and I'll use the mayor of Pierre as my best example, those were 3-year terms that I served. I served 4 3-year terms there. And so at the beginning of each term, I would set out a goal for some fairly major project. My first one was to bring natural gas to Pierre. Now this is, natural gas wasn't in Pierre until 32 years ago. We were sitting in the center of the state with no natural gas capacity within the state of South Dakota for us. And so it had to be brought in from North Dakota. Mayors prior to me had tried to do that, but I always felt that they were using the wrong plan. They were trying to figure out how can the city of Pierre pay for bringing natural gas in. My philosophy is how can the public and the private entities make money on this and the taxpayers of Pierre get a product for nothing, really. Obviously, when it's delivered to your house or your business, you're gonna pay for that fee. But that's what we did. We was able to bring that by a carrier brought it from North Dakota to Pierre, and Montana Dakota Utilities is the one then that delivered it from that head just outside of Pierre to Pierre. And they added a number of other communities, Fort Pierre, Oneida, et cetera, too. The next one I did was 3 years later, and when Congress passed the interstate bill, what they had said in that bill was that every state capital and every major port of commerce would be connected to the interstate system. Well, Pierre was not connected to the interstate system. And so I went to work and decided that was my challenge, is figuring out how to get a 4-lane, that 30 miles, basically from Fort Pierre to I-90. And so I went to the state, and the state said, we don't have any money, that's too big of a deal. I knew that the city of Pierre didn't have it. So where do you look next? You look at the federal government. And so Tom Daschle was the Senate Majority Leader at that time in the U.S. Senate. And so Tom Daschle became, even though he's a Democrat and I was a Republican, he became my best friend during that period of time. And so when I approached him on it and said, I'd like that 4-lane to come through, he said, well, that's a great idea, but the only way I'll work on it is if you bring all the others, the 4 lanes to the others. So it was only halfway completed between Mitchell and Huron, and he wanted the other half of that completed. He wanted the Hartway by Rapid City to the Nebraska border completed, and he wanted the one from Aberdeen to I-29 completed also. And he said, you go work on those communities, make sure they're all on board, and then I'll work with you. Well, he was from Aberdeen. The only one I couldn't get on board on that was the city of Aberdeen. So the city of Aberdeen was afraid that they were going to lose all their commerce to Fargo or Watertown or Sioux Falls. Eventually, when it came about, Daschle just simply said, we're going to do it. And he was able to get that bill through Congress. And that's why these additional 4 lanes were all completed in South Dakota, because of the power that he had at that point in time. So I think you need to figure out something that you want to do, whether it's a major project or something that just takes time, and set your heart on it and go do it. So that's all I have.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to combine the last question with the one audience question that I got. We are at the 1 o'clock hour, but I really like the audience question, so I'm going to ask it with the last question. Do you feel holding an office changed you as a person? And then what is the biggest change you have seen from when you were in office to this day, such as policies, hot button topics, way politics work?
I'll start because I have the shortest answer to that.
I don't think I have an answer.
Has it changed me? It changed the way I looked at things to some extent. I mean, not my core beliefs, but I realized that, sitting on the hot seat isn't always the best place to be sometimes, so it gave you a little more empathy for that. But it also changed your perspective because you saw a more global perspective. You saw both sides of the coin on that. What was the second part, Susan?
What is the biggest change you've seen from when you
Oh.
were in office to this day?
Yeah, the hardest thing that I've seen over the years, and not necessarily from the office that I held, but from holding offices at all, is it's hard to encourage one another to be part of running for an office because of the way sometimes candidates are treated by one another. And I think the biggest thing that we've lost over the last few years is civil discourse. It's okay to disagree, absolutely okay to disagree. In fact, that's what makes us healthy and that's what makes it good. But the civilness of that discourse has changed, and I, personally can't blame people when they say, I just can't do it. And I get it. And I feel sad about that, because we should all feel proud of being part of change and being part of organizations and being part of leadership. But I think that the lack of civil discourse has been probably saddening to me as a public person.
We'll let Tona go last.
I'm just going to second what she said. I agree with it all 100%.
How has it changed me? I think probably the most impactful change for me is not to render my opinion without having the facts. Over the course of running or being in peer, numerous times, be it a coffee group or a family event or whatever, people would, I call them, spout off without having information. And it's important to listen. In those settings, I don't like to debate. I can, but I don't like to. But there's one thing that I would do, and I still do to this day. I said, number one, have you listened to, as an example in peer, have you listened to the committee meetings? It's all online. No. Did you listen to the debate on the floor? No. I said, well, let me tell you, there's a number of times that I had my mind made up because of these guardrails in my mind. This is the way it's got to be. and I would listen. In the evenings, I'd listen to the committee meetings online and listen to the debate, and I changed my mind because I heard both sides. So I would always say in the most compassionate way, do your homework, take the time before you say, I want it done this way. Gather the information, it's all out there. So I think that's one thing that has probably changed me the most, is do your research and listen.
I've got to second what Teresa had to say about civil discourse, and that's all that needs to be said on it. But we need courses and classes on that for every official. I don't care if they're elected or not elected. It's just something that we've lost for some reason over the years, and it needs to be brought back. Civil discourse is critical. One of the things I started out as a journalist way back when, and so one of the things that I've always tried to do is be careful with answers that I give to people. And so when I talk to John Claggett, I try to think that he's a J.P. Skelly, that he's going to go quote me whether I made kind of a flippant answer or not. And so I try to be very careful with that. But I didn't always do that, and I haven't always done it. But I try to be mindful of that all the time. It doesn't make any difference who I'm talking to. Make sure that if they're asking me a question, make sure I'm answering the question the way I want it relayed. Because if it's relayed different than what you want it, you can never catch up to that ball game again. It's gone, and it's forever lost for you. So I think I've tried to change for the better for myself for that reason.
Thank you.
Honestly, these three all made absolutely great points, so I second all of it and leave it at that.
Please help me thank our panelists, Gary Drews, Teresa Creasy, Lance Koth, and Tona Rosem for participating in this candidate school. We will share the recording of this event to the Chamber social media website to be watched anytime. Thank you for joining us today. We hope this has given you some insight as to what running for an elected position entails. If you have any interest, we would encourage you to run for office. We also hope you feel more comfortable seeking out those holding office if you have any questions or concerns for them. Finally, thank you once again to the Mitchell Area Chamber of Commerce Governmental Affairs Committee for organizing this event. Have a great day.